Thank you, Carl, and thank you all for coming. I've heard it said that communication is the most important skill that scientists are never taught. And I think that's probably true. I'd like to begin today by convincing you that the question of how we communicate science is not just very important, but also very old. Does anyone recognize the image we are looking at here? Does anyone recognize the object being drawn in the image? It's the moon. This is a session on speaking, people. Please don't be shy. This is a pencil drawing, one of a series of pencil drawings made, does anyone know the artist? Drawn by Galileo, almost exactly 400 years ago in the summer of 1610. Galileo that summer turned his telescope for the first time to the heavens and made a series of observations. Among them, the fact that one could observe very distinct topography on the surface of the moon. That there were a series of mountains and ridges and what he thought liquid seas that were visible to this telescope but invisible to the naked eye. Now, this was published in Galileo's first book, the Sidereus Nuncius, or the Messenger of the Stars. And this book became one of the final convincing pieces of evidence of the heliocentric cosmology, that the sun was at the center of the solar system and that planets all went around it, as opposed to the Earth being in the center and the planets all going around it. Now, this result was so important, and we remember Galileo as the father of the modern cosmology, not only because he made those observations, but because he shared them. He not only recorded this, but printed it and shared it as broadly as he could. In fact, he published that book in Italian, the language that was spoken by most common people in Italy, which was very rare in its day. The vast majority of academic texts were published in Latin, which was only spoken in a small number of universities. What was important was not just that the science was done, but that it was shared. Same thing's true in the 20th century. Anybody recognize either of these two individuals? They are, I would argue, the 20th century's most influential artist and the 20th century's most influential engineer. On the left is Walt Disney, and the gentleman on the right is Wernher von Braun. Wernher von Braun, who headed the Nazis' rocketry program in Peenemünde until the conclusion of the war, when he became head of the American rocketry program. And von Braun had a vision that it was possible to build ships that would send human beings to bodies off of the Earth, including, in particular, the moon. And rather than just pursue a public policy that was going after that goal, he partnered with Walt Disney to make a series of cartoons for the wonderful world of Disney that depicted this notion, human beings traveling in ships to other heavenly bodies. This picture was taken in 1957. And as we know, only 12 years later, this picture was taken. The ability to capture the public's imagination made a huge difference in what science and engineering we chose to pursue. Now, you can have a pretty substantial argument about whether or not there was any great scientific benefit from this project. You can, however, I hope, agree that it was an extremely well-funded program. All of science funding in America today, both industry and academia, is roughly 2% of our gross domestic product. In 1966, this project alone consumed 1.2% of our gross domestic product. An enviable budget for any researcher.